Everybody, welcome back to the Wicked Sports Podcast. This time it's for January 15th, 2025. A lot to cover today, so let's get right after it. Starting off with the one playoff game we haven't covered yet on the channel, just because when I recorded Monday, it hadn't happened yet. And honestly, this was a surprise even for me. The Rams defeated the Vikings 27-9. So I say even for me because I came into this game thinking the Rams have a good shot to win. They've been one of the better teams the second half of the year. But the Vikings have been one of the best teams for the entirety of the year. They've only lost to the Lions twice. And before this game, the Rams one time. So they finished the season 14-4, having only lost to two teams, the Lions and the Rams, two times each. So I think the Vikings are a good team. I think pretty much anybody who watched this game knows what the problem was here. And the problem, quite frankly, and quite unfortunately for him, was Sam Darnold. So Darnold came into this game, really came into the last two games, having essentially rewritten his NFL story, right? He was a player who was much maligned in New York, played, I think, a little better in Carolina, but, ultimately regressed to what he was. Then he comes out this season. He's one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL for a team that really didn't expect to play him. I mean, he had JJ McCarthy. It looks like he was probably being set up to be the guy moving forward. He goes down in training camp. Kickers Sam Darnold, who's spent a couple years, learning behind good backups elsewhere. How's he going to be? He's been a bust so far. He leads the team to a 14-2 record, and up to that point had really been rolling. And then against the Lions, absolute disaster. And then now against the Rams, maybe an even worse disaster. I mean, it's rare it happens where you come away from a game and you think, despite football being a team sport, that player in particular screwed his team over. And I feel like Sam Darnold screwed his team over by taking so many sacks. I mean, let's look at the stat lines, right? 25 of 40, 245 yards, one touchdown, one pick for Darnold. Aaron Jones led the way rushing with 48 yards for the Vikings. And then TJ Hawkinson, 5 receptions, 64 yards, and the lone touchdown that the Vikings had. Compared to Matthew Stafford, relatively clean day, bit easier. 19 of 27, 209 yards, 2 touchdowns, no picks. Kyron Williams, 76 yards rushing, and Tyler Higbee, 5 receptions, 58 yards to lead the way there. But, I mean, the big story here is the sacks allowed, 9 for the Vikings. The Rams get 9 sacks compared to 2 given up by the Rams. But a lot of those were Sam Darnold just holding on to the ball way too long. And like I said, I thought the Rams would win this game. I didn't think they would dominate it. And even like 27-9, it felt worse while watching it. So an unfortunate ending for the Minnesota Vikings, who have a lot of questions going forward. Do they take a chance on Sam Darnold? Before these last two games, I thought absolutely not. Not because he didn't play well, but because he was going to make way too much money for them to want to commit to a player who they're not going to commit to long term. Like I said, JJ McCarthy, he's going to be that guy coming down the pipe after he returns from injury. And I mean, are you going to pay Sam Darnold 40, 50, $60 million? No shot for the Vikings to do that. So he's going to move on. But now where's he going to move on to? I mean, as I said, he was in line to make 40, 50, and in a crazy world, $60 million. Maybe a team would pay for that. Quarterback play is so important in this NFL, and there are not enough good quarterbacks. There are like 3 quarterbacks who are insanely good, and there's another tier of very good, and then it just keeps going down and down from there. And Sam Darnold had put himself in the at least good to very good tier, and then he ruined it in 2 games. He cost himself tens of millions of dollars. So it'll be very interesting to see. Maybe other teams view these last two games as an aberration, but certainly doesn't look good when they're two games that are essentially playoff games, one to get the one seed. This one, an actual playoff game. He looks the worst he's looked all season in both of them. So, very interesting story that we're going to be following along in this offseason. If you're a Vikings fan, I'm so sorry. 14-3 and a first round exit. That's insane. And if you're a Rams fan, let me know your thoughts about this game. You have to be hyped. So, also thank you for making me look good here with picking the Rams. So let's move on to the next one. So we're going to talk a little bit about the Miami Dolphins, my favorite team. This is the Miami Minute segment that we use to cover my favorite team, the Miami Dolphins. And the Miami Dolphins are making changes. Changes had to be made. They cannot just run it back next year with how everything worked this year. And so the first one I really do agree with. I think the letting go of special teams coordinator Danny Crossman is something that fans have been begging for the last few seasons. Outside of Jason Sanders, who is a top tier kicker when he's on, and this season especially, he was on. He played wonderfully. Special teams play of the Dolphins has been ranked near the league worst almost every single season, of the last 5 years. And at a certain point, that goes on the coach. And Danny Crossman, people have said he outstayed his welcome, and I really do agree with that. And I'm happy to see him gone. I don't want to be like, I'm so glad this person lost his job. But, I hope he gets a job somewhere else, just not for the Dolphins. So if you're a Dolphins fan, let me know your thoughts about Danny Crossman getting fired here. And then the next one was a surprise firing, and one that if you're a longtime Dolphins fan like myself, it makes you a little sad. I have to be honest. Wes Welker, wide receivers coach, was fired from the Dolphins. He is a Mike McDaniel guy. He came over from San Francisco. He was someone who, by all accounts, was doing a good job. And obviously, it's difficult to really judge when you have a talent like Tyreek Hill, who is one of the best receivers in the league, who's been putting up record-setting numbers for the Dolphins the last couple seasons. And you have Jalen Waddle. When he's not hurt, he's a top-tier number 2 wide receiver. However, this year, it seemed that the wide receivers were more or less injured. I mean, we know now that Tyreek Hill was playing the season with a wrist injury, something he sustained in a practice against, I believe it was the 49ers. Is that who they said? Regardless, he had a joint practice. He hurt his wrist. He could have taken surgery to miss the season. He didn't want to do that. He played pretty poorly after that. Maybe he should have just taken the surgery, but I know people would have been pissed because he was a big part of our offense before this season, and he's being paid quite a bit. Is that Wes Welker's fault that Tyreek Hill had a down season because he got hurt? I certainly don't think so. I'm interested to know if you disagree with me. Please let me know. Is it the wide receiver coach's fault that Tyreek Hill's hurt? And then Jalen Waddle also missed some games and never really looked like himself. I assume because he was playing injured when he was playing. And other than that, we had Washington, who kind of became a decent third option for the Dolphins. So, I don't know why you would fire him if we got a decent development from there. We have Eric Ezukama. He never really saw the field outside of the preseason. Maybe that's part of the reason why he gets fired, because we think he's a talented receiver who just never really gets to play, or when he has played, he's gotten injured. But maybe Danny just needed to fire someone to show that he was doing something. So unfortunate for Wes Welker. He is let go by the team here. And then finally, another big change, Skylar Thompson. So he was coming into the season, the backup quarterback. We got rid of Mike White because we're like, hey, here's this player who's been with us for the last 3 years. He's developed. He's going to be our number two. Tua gets hurt, and he looks like he's never played football before in his one start. And then he gets hurt. Eventually, they bring in, of course, Snoop Huntley. He plays better than Skylar. Doesn't play great, but plays better. He's a veteran. He becomes the second quarterback. Skylar bounces between the active roster and the practice squad. Eventually, he is on the practice squad. The Steelers, they sign him this week to be a part of that franchise. So I wish him a lot of luck. He certainly delivered a very exciting playoff game against the Buffalo Bills, though I will say, people say like, oh, he almost beat the Bills. And yes, that's true. The Dolphins almost beat the Bills, but it wasn't necessarily Skylar Thompson. He didn't have a great game. He had an okay game, but the defense played hard and played opportunistically. They were able to keep them in that game that they did eventually lose. And the week before that, he did beat the Jets, who were quite bad, and it was 9-3. So, he did enough to get them into the playoffs. And I'm thankful for that. And I'm thankful that he provided an exciting playoff game, but he was never the answer. And there were like some people in the fandom who were like, Skylar's better than Tua. We need to commit to Skylar. That's crazy. I think a lot of them stopped saying that this season when they really saw how Skylar had kind of not progressed and maybe even regressed in some ways. So those are the changes with the Dolphins so far. If you're a Dolphins fan, let me know your thoughts about all of them in the comments. All right, moving on. So the Texans released wide receiver Dionte Johnson, and I've rarely seen a player absolutely spin out in this year, really. Like, he was a solid receiver for the Steelers. He starts the season off solidly for the Panthers. He gets traded to the Ravens. So, like, from a Panthers team that's not going anywhere this year to a Ravens team that has Super Bowl aspirations. And he eventually isn't able to stay with the team because it's alleged, or I guess said, that he was upset with his usage, which, to be fair, wasn't very much. But, he didn't have a whole off season to learn everything. Look at Buffalo, right? They trade for Amari Cooper, and he hasn't been a huge part of the offense. And he's like a former Pro Bowler, but even he has to like find his way. And I know there's some injuries, but like, you don't see Amari Cooper complaining about his playing time. So he gets released from the Ravens. His season could be over there, but the Texans, decimated by injuries for their receiving core, they sign him. And he, once again, complained about playing time. That's what the word is and why he gets released. And now he's had 3 teams in the year, 4 teams in 2 years, and he's significantly hurt his own stock amongst the league, I would imagine. So Dionte Johnson has put himself in a really, really bad spot here for a wide receiver who's looking to get paid, looking to progress. If you have a bad attitude and you're not like insanely talented, which I'm not saying he's not talented, but he's a wide receiver too, right? He's a wide receiver that teams give up on at the first sign of trouble. And that's going to be really hard for him to recover from. I hope he does. I hope he looks at these last 2 situations and he realizes, like, I'm being immature. I need to be a professional. This is a job. And, he catches on somewhere else. But given that he's flamed out of 2 places for this, maturity reasons within a short period of time, I don't know how likely it is that he's going to actually change at all at this point. So, a very disappointing outcome. I remember I recorded a TikTok for our TikTok channel when he got traded, and I was like, wow, what a great opportunity for him to make an impact on a championship contending team. And that didn't happen. with either of these teams. So pretty rare for a team that is decimated by wide receiver injuries and is still alive in the playoffs to just be like, you know what? I'm good. Get rid of him. So what are your thoughts on the whole Dionte Johnson situation? Let me know in the comment. All right, let's preview the AFC divisional round. So the wildcard weekend was fun, but not close. I'm hoping that these games are a lot closer. First off, we got the Chiefs and the Texans playing in Arrowhead. The Chiefs are obviously the favorite. They're going to probably win this game. Let's lock it in. Chiefs beat the Texans, but their defense is good enough to give Patrick Mahomes a lot of trouble. And if this game can stay close, if the Texans can play well, can get over how hard the Chiefs defense is going to play against them, maybe if everything goes right, they can win. But it really does feel like it's ironic that it's the Texans as well. When the Patriots were running the league, much to my chagrin as a Dolphins fan, they really would get the 1 seed team like the Texans, who are good but not great, would easily dispatch whoever they played in their wild card game. They'd come into Gillette and they would get crushed. It would be like 35-13, 42-21. Like, there'd be maybe moments early when it was close, but it would always get pretty far away. And I'm kind of expecting that same type of vibe here, but that is okay because the other game that we have to watch is the Ravens versus the Bills. So it's going to be a close game, I think. Ooh. So the Bills are kind of a little bit like a surprise this year, only in the sense that, like, I don't think anybody necessarily expected them to be quite as good as they have turned out to be. I think people expected them to be a good team, no doubt, but they've been a great team. Josh Allen has elevated his play, and it's ironic that, like, the 2 MVP favorites, Lamar and Josh, and of course I've locked in Lamar as who I think is going to win it. They're going to get to face off. They're going to get to prove who's the more valuable player here. But the big thing, the difference maker is, the Ravens. They played the Bills earlier in the season. Granted, some of the Bills players weren't playing and they're playing now, but they pretty easily handled the Bills. And the big X factor is Derrick Henry just being so good, just being such a force, especially late into the season now. And I think, like, he's going to be the difference maker here. The Ravens are going to be able to rely on him. And if the Bills sell out, Lamar is going to tear them up, through the passing game, or they're going to have plays like last week where they lined him up as the wild card quarterback and then they motion Lamar, and that confused the defense because he's such an amazing athlete that you can't, normally when the Wildcat happens, and like I said, I'm a Dolphins fan. I saw the Wildcat get birthed in person at Gillette Stadium. Chad Pennington is not drawing the defense in the same way that Lamar Jackson draws a defense. So by waiting and opening this up, I think, the Bills have to just be in their meetings this week like, oh God, if that happens, what then? So I'm going to pick the Ravens. Of course, I am biased as, an anti-Bills fan, but I do think the Ravens will advance and they're going to have a chance to play the Chiefs and avenge not only last year's AFC Championship loss, but other matchups between these two teams, including the first week of the season where they almost beat the Chiefs. And there's, toe down, heel out of bounds. It's not a catch. It's very disappointing. It's a new rule that none of us really were that familiar with as, not rules analysts. So we'll see. That's what I'm hoping for anyways. So Chiefs versus Ravens at Arrowhead for the AFC Championship. That's my pick. What do you think of my two picks here? Let me know if I'm wrong. If you're a Bills fan, you know, tell me I'm an idiot and, rub it in that the Dolphins kind of suck. I'm perfectly fine with that because, again, I think the Ravens will win this game. Moving on to the NFC divisional round, Lions versus Commanders. I think this will be a fun game. I also think the Lions will win pretty handily. I think that the Commanders are a good team, but this is like the first iteration of a Commanders team that will eventually be a lot better, that will eventually really compete should Jaden Daniels continue to take the next step. And I feel like the Lions team is on such a mission right now, trying to get to the Super Bowl, trying to win, trying to do it all for Detroit and their fans who've suffered so long. And they almost feel like a team of destiny, if you will. And I feel like that they're going to easily win this game. It's going to be 35-24, something like that, where it's like close-ish to the end. You're still watching because maybe there's a chance, but it always feels like the Lions are going to, come out ahead. And I'm very interested to see, like, does Ben Johnson have cooking in, this whole week that he's had to prepare to make trick plays. Maybe he's had trick plays or formations that he's been holding back. I'm very excited to see that aspect of things. So picking the Lions to move on against the Commanders. So let's move on to the Eagles versus the Rams. I I think the Rams are going to win. So this is a little bit like, oh, I'm defending the maybe the Rams could go on a run narrative that I put out last week. And I don't know. There's just something about this team the last like 2 months of the season that seem insanely locked in. And I know the Eagles are great, but the Rams defense and their defensive line especially have done a great job. And I heard someone say, take the Moneyball term, recreating Aaron Donald in the aggregate between the players that they have there and really get the same usage, the same effect that he had out of a bunch of different players. And I think that's so impressive. I think Chris Shula is really ratcheting up this defense, and they're going to potentially, come in to Philadelphia, shut down Saquon Barkley, and force Jalen Hurts to pass. And if stuff starts going badly, I mean, we saw AJ Brown when stuff was going quite well for the team start to read self-help books on the sideline. Can't be doing that, man. You can't be like causing storylines for other people to pick up on. And, just, I don't know, a completely like useless thing to be happening. Something that you don't want to see necessarily from a team like the Eagles. So yeah, not great. I think it could be or will be very close, but I do think that the Rams will come out ahead. And then the NFC Championship game, Rams versus the Lions. Lions at home. They've had this trade. They sent their greatest quarterback of all time off to Los Angeles. He wins the Super Bowl. Now we're coming back. He's coming in with the Lions being the favorite, the team that he, you know, blood, sweat, tears, broken bones, broken backs for this team that have kind of like weirdly turned on him. And now he comes in to potentially be the villain, to potentially end the best team the Lions have maybe ever had in the Super Bowl era. And I think that is really compelling. If there is an NFL script, that's the storyline that you need to have to keep people interested. So, again, picking the Lions, picking the Rams, let me know. Do you think that's good? Do you think my picks are bad? Am I an idiot? Let me know in the comments. So, thank you so much for checking out this episode of the Wicked Sports podcast for January 15th, 2025. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, please subscribe. Check out our other channels, Wicked Good Everything, where we cover video games, and Those Fake Nerds, where we cover nerd news, and of course, our podcasting channel for all our podcasts outside of Wicked Good Sports under the Wicked Good Everything umbrella. That is, of course, Better Radio. Check them all out on YouTube. Thank you so much for listening, and we will see you in the next one.